Episode 113 of the podcast. What is it called when we start just pushing a dog through a grooming process, or through any process really? What is that called, and what are our expectations? Find out this week. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, a certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. Many groomers, owners, vets will continue to do something with a dog on the idea that just pushing through it will get them used to it. And I know where you're coming from. I think I was taught that way. Many of us were taught that way. So the hope is that the dog will realize that this doesn't hurt. This is just life. This is how things happen. That we're not trying to be mean, that it's not scary, and the dog will figure that out on their own. But I want to talk a little bit about what that method is called. Because when we look back and we're able to say, hey, I know that this is a method. Hey, that's actually kind of cool too. Like, that's a method. And let's look back and see what that means. What does it mean? What is it called? And what are the outcomes? So what that method is called is, I'm going to tell you, that's called flooding. So flooding is when we're trying to just put them in the deep end, expose them to everything. And what we're hoping for through exposing them to everything, whether it's something they're afraid of or something they don't know about. The world throws flooding at us pretty often. Imagine, so a friend of mine adopted a dog who had lived outdoors his whole life. And now he's 9, learning how to live in a home. But there's no option for him to live outdoors. This was flooding. He was living indoors. Total immersion. By the way, this is your life now. So with very little thought to how it affects him emotionally or physically. Well, of course, we can think about it, but in this case, flooding. We really had no other choice. She's not going to let him live outdoors in winter. Anyway, so flooding happens. Flooding happens in the real world, but that's what it's called, is flooding. When it's total immersion, this is your new life now. And the hope is habituation. Now, habituation is where it just becomes habit, where it becomes normal, where you're relaxed about it and you're like, oh, you're right, this is just my life now. So that's our hopeful outcome. That's what most of us were taught, is that that's what will happen. The problem is that when we're using something like flooding, there are, well, I'm going to narrow it down to 2 possible outcomes. Again, the world is certainly more dynamic than that. There are more outcomes than just the 2, but these are the 2 main outcomes. One is habituation, where the dog is like, hey, okay, this isn't so bad. I guess this is my life now. And the other one is when they become sensitized. And becoming sensitized means they become very, very sensitive to all of it and overwhelmed. And that's when our problems crop up. In dog grooming, that's the classic, he had a bad experience once, So the problem with flooding is that when it doesn't work, it actually creates more problems than we would have had before. Because the same dog might have responded really well to just gradually learning about stuff, instead of this total immersion version of, we're going to get a perfect trim on you today, and you're going to let me do every little bit. Which, all right, so if you listen to the podcast, I'm not a big fan of doing it that way anyway, but I think that that's still in our mindset. And I still go there, right? I still go there. I'm still like, hey, dude, we're almost done, and kind of forget once in a while that early training that I got wasn't necessarily as effective as our modern techniques. So sometimes just slip into an old habit. But if you think about, okay, so how can I expose this dog to smaller pieces instead of the whole thing all at once, right? Instead of flooding, instead of total immersion, by the way, you're in the deep end of the pool and we're going to teach you how to swim here. Why are you panicking? Like, you're not going to drown. I'm not going to let you drown. But someone who's panicking doesn't know you're not going to let them drown, right? They're in the deep end of the pool and they're panicking. Probably not the most effective way to teach many, many people how to swim, but someone out there learned to swim that way, right? And that's where sometimes we start hearing these stories about, like, well, you just got to push them through it and get them used to it, because some dogs are like, oh, okay. Like, some dogs are going to be fine with it. So let's talk a little bit about other times when the world throws flooding at us. Here is another example that I think we can all relate to. Your puppy, you bring your puppy home, everything's going great, and then you get a thunderstorm. And maybe you're not even home for the thunderstorm. You have no idea how your puppy was reacting to the thunderstorm, but your puppy was at home, total immersion in a thunderstorm. And we all know that a lot of dogs have phobias about thunderstorms. A lot of dogs have a lot of issues with thunderstorms, and that's something we really can't control when thunderstorms happen. So they can become sensitized, overly sensitive to, have a negative response to, a conditioned emotional response to thunderstorms. And so when you think about, like, that, other dogs are totally fine with thunderstorms. And I know that seems weird too, because I think sometimes owners assume that dogs hate thunderstorms, but there are plenty of dogs who are fine with thunderstorms. My last girl would startle with the first bang and then just, oh, okay, but that's what's happening. It's a thunderstorm, right? I gotta say, don't we? Most of us do that too. Like, that first kabang, you're like, oh, I alerted to that. That was loud. Guess we're having a thunderstorm. So Mother Nature throws flooding situations at us, and some dogs become very sensitive to it. And then you spend a large amount of time trying to counter condition and desensitize, trying to build their confidence up around something that they used to think was scary, and doing it slowly and gradually in little pieces. Because, like I said, flooding is either going to result in habituation, where, oh, I guess this is my life now. This is okay. Not a big deal. I have observed that I am not dying. Or it's going to result in, that was really scary. I'm really, really scared. I don't want to be in that situation again. So when we're pushing a dog through grooming, that's what we're using. We're using flooding, and we're using it with the hope of habituation. And in the next part, I'm going to explain to you why knowing that can be helpful. If you're enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes, and tell all of your friends. Why is it helpful to know that? Why is it helpful to know that that process is called flooding and the possible outcomes are habituation or sensitization? Well, I'm going to say it's helpful to know that because then you can be better observing the dog for signs of, is this dog becoming more relaxed? Is this dog relaxing and understanding that, oh, this isn't so bad, I'm getting used to it? Or is this dog getting more sensitive? So if you think about it, if you're now observing the dog, instead of thinking, well, you know what, he'll get used to it, he'll get used to it, he'll get used to it, and missing some really key signals that this dog is not getting used to it. or missing the signals that he really is. Because you know what? The opposite can be true too. Sometimes people are like, oh, no, stop there. And I'm like, no, actually, he was doing okay. Oh, but I know he's afraid of that. Yeah, but he was doing all right. We were working together. He was doing okay. Because I'm in a home with owners who are observing, and they're like, oh, I'm not so sure about that tool. I'm like, okay, well, let me explain my tool to you, because sometimes owners are sensitized too. But the opposite can be true. You have to be able to look and say, wait a minute, am I trying to desensitize a dog who really just doesn't need that level of commitment from me? The dog that doesn't need that much help? A dog who can just kind of get a little bit of guidance and relax through it? So you need to hone your senses and think about, all right, what is this dog experiencing right now? Is this dog thinking, this isn't so bad? Is this dog gradually getting better? Or is this dog gradually getting worse? And that's the difference. And knowing that that's a possible outcome can help groomers or anybody who's working with their dog, owners, vets, but can help us to eliminate the bigger problem when they truly become sensitized, when they are way over the top. So sensitized, let me give you some examples of dogs that we commonly see who have been sensitized to something. The dog that has a response when they see a nail trimmer has been sensitized to a nail trimmer. Their experience with that was overwhelming enough that now they have this response to an inanimate object, right? The tool that did the thing or was involved with the thing. Because really, that's not what they're afraid of. They're not afraid of the tool. They're afraid of some part of the nail trimming process. In my experience, it's not even usually the nail trimming. It's the way we have to hold for it. Or the fact that they were struggling and we kept going and they kind of, strained something while they were struggling. So that's an example, sensitized. Now, in good faith, someone probably just kept pushing him through that nail trim. Like, he's going to get used to it. This is really important. We need to get this done today. Without knowing that that was going to create the very problem that most of us are trying to solve in dogs later in life. So that's an example of a dog who has become sensitized to part of our process. So anytime a dog looks at an inanimate object, right, any grooming tool, and has some sort of a visceral reaction, like a crouching, fearful, or, and oh gosh, here's another example that owners use that I still hear people giving this advice, using a water bottle, a spray water bottle, to get a dog to stop barking, or as a punishment to knock it off, or to get him away from the trash can, or except that we use spray bottles for things like hair conditioner, finishing spray, detangling sprays. The vet uses it for peroxide, for rubbing alcohol. We use spray bottles for a lot of different things. If your dog has a response to a spray bottle that says it's time to cower and run, then that dog has become sensitized to spray bottles. They didn't learn, don't pick at the trash. They didn't learn to not bark at people. They learned that the spray bottle is unpleasant and might come out when they're barking at people or picking at the trash if a human is there. So instead of the message that people were trying to get across, because I don't care what he feels about spray bottles, yeah, you kind of do, because that's going to cost you money later on when he's getting groomed or when he's at the vet's office and he has a meltdown because of a spray bottle. So spray bottles, another common inanimate object that dogs have a response to. Sometimes dogs have a response to inanimate objects that is joyous. So, that's not necessarily habituation, but it could be, this is your life now. These are the sounds around in your world. And we don't really spend time teaching dogs about Ziploc bags, but they figure it out. Right? We don't spend a lot of time teaching dogs about our car keys, but they figure it out. Oh, somebody picked up the keys. What's going on? Somebody's leaving. Something's happening. Right? So they can become sensitive to without necessarily being unpleasant. But I think when we're talking about grooming procedures and veterinary procedures and care at home, what is happening is they're either getting used to it and allowing us to do it and not becoming overly thrilled, excitable, and having the opposite problem of dancy prancy and getting hurt because they're jumping around being silly. We need them to be calm, comfortable, and cooperative. I know not an episode goes by when I don't say it, right? But we need them to be calm, comfortable, and cooperative. So if what we're trying to do is flood them with this experience and push them through the whole entire thing and try to have them be calm, comfortable, and cooperative the whole time, some dogs do habituate to that. That becomes habit. They start to realize, I guess this is my life now. This isn't so bad. Whatever. But we don't necessarily want them crazy or silly, which would be another form of sensitized. Oh, cool. Is it time? Which is part of why I worry about when we start adding peanut butter and lick mats and stuff, because now it becomes almost like that going to the refrigerator and pulling out dog treats response, which is not conducive to putting scissors next to eyes. So there are times where we will let a dog become silly and then teach them how to be good. Let me give you an example. I was working with a little dog who for a long time was just really kind of scared. Get this little dog more relaxed. Get this little dog more relaxed. Working on things gradually, not doing full grooms, right? We don't want to do flooding. So we don't want to do flooding. We're working on what this dog can handle and building on what this dog can handle. And as she started to be more relaxed, now she's like, oh, okay, I'm relaxed. And maybe a little bit silly if I invite her to be a little bit silly. Because I'd rather have her be a little bit silly with me and not afraid, get past the fear, and then learn how to be more appropriate. Right? So sometimes I'm going to encourage a little bit of silly, get them past the fear, let them realize that I'm a goofball too. We can have a little bit of fun, and then learn how to be more appropriate, how to be more still, when to be still, right? And I'll allow a little bit of cuckoo. That's tech talk, a little bit of cuckoo on my table. If I'm trying to help a dog, bring that dog out of their shell, and then go back to, and now this is how we behave. But as she started to realize, like, oh, okay, and this is how we behave, it's almost like it dawned on her. You could almost see the wheels turning in her little head. And she said, what if I'm just evasive? What happens if I just move away while she's trying to trim around my eyes? So, so she got comfortable, but then she's also like, what if I just move away? I mean, I don't love doing this. We could be doing something else, right? And that's okay, because now I can address that behavior with a dog who is confident, with a dog who is comfortable with what I'm trying to do, just choosing to like, what if I decide to go do something else? So I want you to think about flooding isn't necessarily a good idea. I don't want you using it. And that's what I talk about when I'm saying, hey, let's not push full trims on dogs. Let's talk to owners about a safety policy before they even come in. And if their dog is having a problem with any part of our process, we're going to slow things down, reevaluate, see what we can do, and address the behavior. And you might not have a perfectly trimmed dog today. Say it up front. Say it up front, because then they're going to ask their questions. Well, but I'm paying for a haircut. Oh, I see where you might think that. And let them ask their question, right? Yeah, if your dog can handle a haircut, I am happy to just do a haircut. But if your dog is scared, then we need to teach them about their lifetime of haircuts. So if we talk to our owners, we can get a chance to explain it so that when it happens, we're not in this situation that we put ourselves in. I say we, because I've been there. We put ourselves in this situation where we think, I got to push through this. I got to push through this. Oh my God, this owner's going to be here at 2. She's going to be so mad if this isn't done. I got to keep pushing, got to keep pushing, got to keep pushing. And that is flooding. And its 2 possible outcomes are habituation or sensitization. And if you know that ahead of time, like, oh, wait a minute, whoa, this could be that pivotal moment where this dog decides he is never going to let someone near him with nail clippers again. This could be a long, tedious process to counter condition later. This could be a big mess. and to put a hard stop. Like, nope, we're not going to do that. Even if that's what the owner thinks they want. Talk to your owners. So much of this is talking to owners. And knowing that we need to explain stuff to them about our process. They don't understand. They don't get it. They have no idea there's a safety issue unless you explain it to them. Because they think the safety issue is if their dog bites or using a grooming loop or a cage dryer. You know, like, really? That's what you're worried about? But your dog is trying to bite me while I scissor next to his eye? But you're worried about the cage dryer. Or you're worried about, some loud noise. Like, they don't understand. We have to talk to them. But now that you know that just pushing through it, yep, that's a process, and that is called flooding. And it has 2 possible outcomes. And if you're not seeing habituation starting to happen, then you're probably seeing sensitization starting to happen. And now that you know that, knowledge is power. Now you can watch for it, and you can see, wait a minute, is this dog getting more and more worried? I think I need to reevaluate how we're going to work with this dog. This dog today, at this time, not forever. Eventually we can get them used to something, but we don't need to do it through flooding. We don't need to do it through this total immersion, everything all at once, throw everything at you. We can be smarter than that. We can plan, and we can get our owners on board. And the owners who aren't on board, I know I've said this before, and people are like, can I even send owners to your podcast? I'm talking to the owners too. So if you want to send your owners to my podcast, I'm talking to them too. Because if they are not willing to help with this process, or to even when faced with the full knowledge of what this all means, right, then they're not your customer. And I know people are like, oh, I can't send a customer to something that says that. I think you can, because these are the conversations I have directly with people. And when I talk to them about it, I'm like, you know what? But your friend is doing it this way. And that actually causes problems. And let me tell you why. And let me tell you how we prevent that. And they're like, oh, okay. And my customers actually, when I tell them like, hey, I have some openings, because I don't often have like openings for new customers. I'm a house call groomer. It's a different format. But if I'm like, hey, I have some openings for like my Friday rotation, if anybody has any friends, my customers are so funny about like, nope, this friend of mine has a small dog, but I don't think she's right for you. I don't think she'd understand. And I'm like, well, send her anyway, and I'll talk her through it. And sometimes those people are like, oh no, he just needs to look perfect. I don't care what he feels about it. Like, okay, but I'm trying to explain to you why that's not great. Sometimes I see them years later when now their dog is untouchable with some piece of equipment, some tool. But, you think about selling it to people and helping them understand the need. And also, guys, as someone who's been grooming for a long time, I don't like getting hurt at work. Don't like getting hurt at work. And I very, very rarely, have a dog get injured. I mean, we all know it happens. Sometimes you quick a nail, which I'm going to consider an injury too. But, it's pretty rare. Why? Because I don't let those crazy, crazy rodeos happen. And by rodeo, I mean the dog flipping around on a leash like he's on a trout on a line, flailing around on a table, and I don't let that stuff happen. So when you think about gradual progress and watching to see if a dog is becoming more sensitive or if they're becoming more relaxed, break it down into its easiest form. I'm going to keep going with this grooming, but I don't plan on pushing past no matter what. And I'm watching for signs that this dog isn't having a good time. If you'd like more information, you can find me at Chrissy@happycritters.net, happycrittersdogtraining.com, or you can join the Facebook group, Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast, or the Facebook page, Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I really look forward to hearing from you.